It's about to go down with Marc and Cathey, a live coaching show about dropping ideas. Marc and Cathey coach and have conversations with brilliant idea creators who are reimagining the world through the expression of their words, thoughts, and action.
Hey, everybody. I am Cathey Armias.
And I am Mark Williams, and we want to welcome you to another episode of It's About to Go Down. And today I'm going to introduce to you the newest brother in the family. I met him all the way in Nassau, Bahamas. For the World Championship of Public Speaking, this man dropped himself on the stage, made the loudest boom, and made such an impression on me. You know, I love to introduce him in so many different ways, by so many different trades, but I cannot do it justice. I'll just tell you, there is a professional wrestling connection. I'll leave it at that, but it goes way beyond that. This man is no individual thing, because what inspires our conversation today is his idea around pursuing interests, passions, curiosities, and unconventional ideas. Mr. Man of Many Identities, Mr. John Lund, welcome to It's About to Go Down. How you doing, my friend?
Good, thank you so much. You know, you're going through this introduction. I'm just like, who is this guy? He sounds really interesting. I'm not sure if that's me.
It's 100,000% you, John.
We probably should start this show with all of the clips from all of the different things that you have done. You have truly become the embodiment of doing all kinds of things, whether they were recommended or not. And I love for you to start off there. Talk to us about how, why this idea about pursuing your interests, your passions, your curiosities, and unconventional things. Where'd that idea come from?
But before you do that, John, hold on one sec.
Yeah.
Only because you're going to make it sound very normal and conventional. And I just want to say that the first time I ever heard of a wife carrying contest was because of you, my friend. And then I watched the video and I was like, oh my God, this is a real international thing. And so I'm just going to say that, because everything you're about to say, you're going to say it, I'm sure, with very much like it's very normal. But when I heard it, I was like, what? Okay.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Cathey, for setting that up, because unconventional sounds like anything until you say wife carrying competition.
Yes. World champion, by the way.
Yes.
I guess, let's start at the beginning of the story. And that is, I think even from a very early age, I never felt like I fit in. Right. So even in elementary school, I would go to school, get on a little bus, little backpack, little, lunchbox and whatnot, hang out with other students at school. And I never felt like I was one of them. I always felt like an outsider. And maybe as I progressed through the years, I just kind of always saw what was happening in like a mainstream sense, didn't feel connected to it. So I ended up going in different directions. And wife carrying as an alternative sport could be an example of that. I'm not even sure anymore, because I think, like Cathey mentioned, these things that others view as absurd or outside the norm just strike me now as just normal. Like it's just Tuesday. Like it doesn't really faze me anymore. So
I knew that would happen, John.
Yeah, it's true. And man, even this week, okay, so I'm currently in the US. I normally live in Finland, but I was doing a technology presentation this week in Norfolk, Virginia. So I work in the ports industry, and I work for a technology company, and we help ports and terminals and logistics industry become more efficient. And when I was introduced at the beginning of my panel, part of my bio included that I do the sport of wife carrying. Okay, and that got a huge pop from the audience. And it was clear that some people there knew what it was about. And at the end of my panel discussion, I'm coming off stage, I'm walking around in the conference area, having some coffee, and I'm approached by a union leader Okay, and union leaders don't really like technology being put into the ports and terminals. Obviously, it's a threat for their union members. And he had been kind of aggressive towards some of the speakers, and he approached me. And I was like, oh boy, let's see where this goes. And he says, hey, were you that guy who does the wife carrying? And I was like, yeah. He's like, that's such a cool sport. I've been trying to get my wife to do it for years. And we had this 15-minute discussion about wife carrying, and he knew the complete history of it. It was so unexpected. But I think there's a strong subculture of these of people who are into these alternative sports, and for one reason or another, they may be less attracted to the mainstream sports, and these things off the beaten path pique their interests. And that's just been me since a very early age.
I love it so much. Like, you know, I feel like there's a huge part of the world that craves this kind of, you know, I don't want to do things the conventional way. And when you were younger, John, I like how you explain it starting from when you were younger, because I think when you're young and you're a kid, and correct me if I'm wrong in your case, it feels very uncomfortable to feel like you're the outsider. You're not the one there. But then as you get older, it becomes kind of almost like a badge of honor. Like, I'm not going to do that normal thing. Like, that sounds so normal. Like, that sounds so normal. I want to do the thing that's unconventional. And I love how even the unconventional becomes conventional to you. So it means like you're living your life in this such an unconventional way that it's absolutely conventional to you.
And that becomes a double-edged sword, because I have this yearning or craving for something unconventional, and like I find myself constantly pushing the boundaries. So when whatever I'm doing starts to feel normal, or maybe stale or flat, then I need to find some way to reinvent myself. And I think that's been a pretty common theme throughout my life, that I've just never stayed in one place for too long, and I've constantly been looking for the next challenge.
What does that do for you? Like, how do you benefit from that?
How do I benefit from that? I feel like I'm constantly learning. And I think that's one of the main drivers, that I'm just inherently curious, I guess. And if I'm not doing something that satisfies my curiosity or feeds into it somehow, then I feel like almost lifeless. And so a really good example is about, what year was it? 2015, I was living in Austria, and I was part of the management team of an international IT company. And I reported directly to the CEO, and I handled all the legal issues as a lawyer. And I didn't get any satisfaction from it anymore, because it just seemed stale and flat. And at the time, I had been doing full contact kickboxing, and I'd been doing some other film work, and I made a movie that got into a local film festival and won an Audience Choice Award. So I put together these two interests of full contact kickboxing and film, and decided I should quit my job, move to LA, and try professional wrestling, because that's what every 38-year-old does, right? I don't know. And when I was telling my colleagues, yeah, I'm going to move to LA and try professional wrestling, they were like, what? Like it didn't even like they couldn't even process what I said. Like, I had to repeat myself a couple of times. And they're like, you're an executive at this company. Like, you're going to quit your job, move to Los Angeles, and try professional wrestling at age 38. I was like, yeah, like what? Like, why shouldn't I do that? Looking back on it now and being a little bit more objective, it's like, okay, yeah, I guess that is weird. But at the time, it seemed like a great idea, and it's what I did.
Mark, I love the question that you asked him, because, John, my brain immediately goes, and it always goes here. You don't know me that well, but I can't help it. Everything in my brain is like, how is John's idea going to be great for the world? What can the world learn from your idea? And, so I always get to that spot where I'm like, if you were going to give a TED talk tomorrow, what would be the idea that you'd want? And so I love that, that you'd want to share. And I love that Mark asked you, like, what does it do for you? And when you started talking, I don't know if you thought about this, Mark, but you know how your brain has we have a lot of neuroplasticity with our brain. And the best thing that you can do for your brain is do new things. Like you can create new pathways in your brain. I'm like, John's brain must be amazing. Amazing. Like that brain is solid because you're always like, and I get that. Like I can only imagine all the new things your brain has to learn when you do something that you've never done before, or you challenge or push yourself in a way that you've never done before. And so my brain went to the question of like, I was like, oh, if John was giving a TED talk, I would think he'd be asking the audience, like, what's unconventional for you? Like, how can you live in your own version of unconventional? I don't know if that resonates with you, but those are my thoughts.
It does. I think, it's not unconventional for the sake of being unconventional. It's just unconventional and, from the perspective of others. And I think so many people are trying to, fit a mold that isn't theirs. Because there are expectations put on them from friends, family, society, whatever the case might be, and then you end up being really unhappy. And I guess I just never wanted to live like that. That if we look at the US and look at drug use and the use of antidepressants, it's not because people are living their best lives, right? It's because people are in unhappy situations, and there can be a lot of different reasons for that. But when I look at a lot of my friends who are in, what would be considered good jobs, many of them are not that happy. Just because they're being forced into a situation that doesn't allow them to express themselves.
Yeah.
This is interesting because you said it's not about being unconventional for the sake of being unconventional, right? Because I find that a lot of people get caught up in that. I just want to be different. I just want to be different, right? But it's so much more beyond that, because what I now am hearing you say is it's about being unconventional to be happy. There's a level of happiness that is found there. And I think you wrap it up with the neuroplasticity. Thank you, Cathey, for throwing that one in there, right? The idea of doing something new and different to achieve happiness is something I haven't heard before. That's fascinating.
It is. And it also may, I'll take it a little bit deeper too. I grew up in a family where I was the only one, I would say, of my siblings that didn't have the engineer mind. I didn't have the analytical mind. So I grew up thinking when I was young that I was the dumb one in the family. But what I found out later was I was the uber creative one. And it wasn't until later that you can go, oh God, you can do a lot of really great, way more, unconventional, but there's so many things you can do if you use your creative mind. And I now believe that everybody has a creative mind, but we allow it to get stifled in some way. And everybody's creativity can show up in different ways. And so, John, in your particular world and things that you have done, I just think that you have, your unique set of like, oh, I really like this, would be interesting. And it's just different from other people. So that's why when I was thinking of it as like, people have to find what's unconventional, but yet creative outlet. I don't know. That's where I'm going is like, you're right. How many people enjoy, going up a corporate ladder, getting into a job, but for the sake of this job, you're having to work 80 hours a week. You can't see your family. You don't really have time, or more than time, energy, because you're tired to do things that you might enjoy. And even those enjoyments might be things that are conventionally the things that you're supposed to do. Like you should run or jog, or you should or lift weights, go to the gym. And so you get put into this whole system of like, these are the things that you should do, but it's all about being creative and finding what makes you happy. So I like that, Mark.
And you know what else stands out to me? Because John, you just described the work that you're doing now, right? Which can sound very conventional, right? Like a 9 to 5 and doing presentations. And yet you're still carrying around your wife. You're probably still doing
Air guitar.
Oh man, and there was something else that you said a while ago that just blew my mind. Was it the mosquito competition?
Yes.
That one I haven't done actually. So well, let's put this into let's explain this for the audience, right? So Finland is home of a wide range of alternative sports and activities. And the first one I ever became aware of was wife carrying. And this is a sport in which a man carries a woman over an obstacle course, and the prize is the woman's weight in beer. And the course is relatively short. It's about 2.5 football fields long. And there are a couple of obstacles along the way. So there's hurdles to jump over, water trench to go through. The race takes a little bit more than a minute. And that was the first one that got me to Finland and kind of opened my eyes to this world of alternative sports. Once I got there, I realized that there's this whole universe that exists. So Finland is home of the World Air Guitar Championships, the World Swamp Football Championship, swamp soccer. So you're playing soccer in a swamp, like running through a swamp, trying to kick a soccer ball into nets. And that is exhausting. Like as if soccer, isn't hard enough. Okay, let's put you knee deep in mud and see how well you can do.
Wow.
Then there is the World Mosquito Killing Championships. So there's a joke in Finland that their air force is made up of mosquitoes, right? So and you go into the woods and you'll just get eaten alive. The mosquitoes are absolutely brutal. So some Finns came up with this idea. Okay, you have to stand over a white sheet for 10 minutes, and however many mosquito corpses are around you at the end of that 10 minutes, determines who's the winner, whoever has the most. But I never got a chance to do that because the Green Party in Finland came in and shut it down and said that it was cruel and unusual punishment for mosquitoes. So.
Yeah, tell that to New Yorkers in the middle of the summer. We're like,
right. You're like, this is cruel and unusual punishment.
But John, you would have done it, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Did you ever try it out? Like just on your own? Like
just
on the DL?
Being in Finland, you live it.
I mean, what are you doing it with? Are you doing it with whatever? Does it matter?
So the mosquitoes, land on you, right? And you just
gotcha. Okay, so it literally is kind of like a self pat down. Okay.
Right. There's the World Sauna Championships, which I did compete in.
Yes.
And that was absolutely brutal. So it's 100 degrees Celsius, which is the boiling point of water. And the judges keep pouring water onto the stones. It's a wet sauna, so that it essentially becomes this steam cooker on the inside of the sauna. And whoever lasts the longest wins. And I lasted 1 minute and 1 second before I had to get out. You just feel like you're on fire.
And how did you fare again? Because I think you said that there was somebody that went longer, or?
Yeah, I did not do very well overall. So it's like in many sports, people were taking performance enhancing drugs to be able to last longer in the sauna. So they were taking ibuprofen, taking painkillers, drinking alcohol, doing anything they could to be able to endure the pain the longest. Wow. And the year after I did it, one person died and another person was put into an induced coma for 6 months.
Oh my gosh, because it just pushed their body past the limits.
Exactly. And you can think about it like cooking an egg, right? You can't uncook an egg. And in an interview, one of the paramedics who was helping these people out of the sauna said that it was like cooked flesh. And when they went to lift up the person to help them out, a lot of their skin and muscle just kind of fell off the bone.
Oh, Mark.
Yeah.
Oh, yikes. It is.
I'm going to live with that image for a little bit. Oof.
Well, I was already thinking about the brain being the egg, I was thinking about your brain kind of getting cooked. Oof, yikes. Ooh. So,
right. Go ahead, Kathy. Yeah.
no, I was gonna say, so a lot of, you're probably gonna ask the same question, right? So a lot of unconventional things, what message do you want, what would you want to pull through and give to people with the experiences you've had, John?
If there's something that you're interested in, for whatever reason, you should try it. And you don't need to justify that interest to anybody other than yourself. If it's something you're legitimately interested in doing, pursue it. And a great example, of course, is the wrestling at age 38. I wanted to try to be a professional wrestler. What would that play out like? And I moved to Los Angeles. I joined a professional wrestling school. I had a professional wrestling coach, and I learned what professional wrestling is like. And I learned that it's probably not for me at age 38 because it's extremely brutal. It's very hard on the body, and it gave me a different level of respect for professional wrestlers. That seeing what these men and women do day in, day out for years on end, that they are really some of the toughest people on the planet. That yes, the matches might be scripted and there's a predetermined outcome, but all of the falls that they're taking are real. Crashing through a table cannot be faked. It's not fake in that sense. And if you go back to some of the 80s and 90s and some of those legends of the sport, many of them were addicted to painkillers or different kinds of drugs. And you realize that they needed those drugs just simply to get through the matches because they're so brutal. The schedule is so brutal that they go through. I wouldn't have had that experience unless I quit my job and moved to LA to do that. And it sounds strange, but I'm very glad that I did it. Otherwise, I would have spent the rest of my life wondering, what is that like?
Right.
So, Kathy, I was going to ask something similar, but I want to go down this rabbit hole for a second. It's one thing to say, you know what, quit your job and, pursue a speaking career, right? It's another thing to say, sign up for a sauna competition, or sign up to become the world champion of wife carrying, or sign up for the mosquito killing contest. Like, there are some people who think, wait, hold on. Did you really say somebody had to be scraped off of the platform on a sauna and there was flesh? Like, what would make somebody do that? And I love that you did say you should be able to do something that you don't have to justify why you did it, right? But I do love exploring what would make somebody do something like this, because I think that is crucial to a transition into convincing people to try something new. I gotta understand, like, I can almost see you on a TED stage or doing a training or a keynote and starting out with all of these different competitions. Like when you said the universe, I heard the metaverse of alternative sports. To be able to even tell people all of these different things, like my mouth drops. And then my brain is like, why? Why would somebody do that? And my immediate thought is, yeah, there's something really wrong with you, John. But what I don't get is there's something really right about that type of thinking. Something that directs you and others towards happiness. And that's why I think it's so important to explore and to even explain why somebody would do something so unconventional, so weird, so, dare we say, terrible ideas.
I think it comes back to wanting to learn more about yourself and testing your own limits. I think that's really a big part of it. And Toastmasters was a good example of that. So when I got into Toastmasters a little over a year ago, I didn't really know much about it. And it was only after I had been a member for a month that I learned that there are speaking competitions. And I thought, oh, okay, this is interesting. So I entered the table topics contest, and I just went into it thinking, how far can I take this? Right. And then I made it to the district championships and totally bombed. Okay, so I have an answer to my question now. Right. And then, then it was the same thing with the inspirational speech contest. I was thinking, okay, how far can I push this? And that took us to Nassau to the semifinals. And I got an answer to my question. And I think I'm really just answering questions about myself. I'm asking myself questions and then trying to find answers.
John's probably the only one in the world that we could ask this question, right? Because everybody says that fallacy of like public speaking's the #1 fear, even over death. And, it's not quite in the right context. But it's like John's doing things like a sauna competition where he literally is like facing death and then he's speaking. Which one is worse, John? Tell us. You're our inside track on that.
The results of the speaking contest were probably more painful than the time I spent in the sauna. I don't like losing for something that I put a lot of effort into. And with the sauna championship, I don't think I really had expectations of doing that well. I was just curious, and there wasn't any kind of emotional connection to it. Whereas with the speeches that I wrote and delivered, especially the one about my wife, that there was a lot of emotional connection there. So when I didn't advance to the final, it was like, okay, I didn't do my wife justice. It was more personal in that sense.
Gotcha. Yeah. Your speech was awesome, by the way. It was great. It was phenomenal. It's, I love that. I love this, it really boils down to two things that you said that I think are so great for anybody, just kind of learning something about yourself and testing your limits. And that's the only way to learn about yourself. I also think like if you were giving this as a TED Talk, you obviously have a lot of supporting evidence in your life. I'm curious if somebody was listening, like Mark, you and I could probably play a game because John's already played this game. So this is not John's game anymore. It's like our game. Like what would you be willing to do, Mark, to push your limits? What thing would you be willing to do that's outside of your comfort zone that you're like, oh gosh, I don't think I can do that, or that seems bizarre, or that's going to push me. Like, I don't know.
First of all, how dare you ask me that question in the presence of John? Anything that I say is going to be child's play, really.
I know. You're like, ask me later when he's not around. Then it won't be embarrassed.
The first thing that really comes to mind, and I was watching that show, Amazing Race, was eating insects.
Oh, yeah.
Look at John. John's like child's play. I had that for dessert yesterday.
He's like eating insects.
But
my skin was coming off my body.
and I'm not talking about chocolate covered. I'm talking about moving, live, crawling around, like
scorpions or
cockroaches. Like,
ooh.
Ooh.
Okay, good. See, I'm glad you said that, Mark. Because I'm like, you want to hear my child's play? Mine's child's play to yours, Mark. I'm like, oh, doing a stand-up bit as a comedian would be like really hard. Like, I don't think people understand how much work they have to do and how much adversity you have to, how much people expect you to make them laugh constantly. I'm like, that would be really hard. And so, but this is, John, exactly what I wanted to give you some evidence right here of like how, you're going to put this talk together. You're going to tell everybody, here's a good idea. Push yourself in different ways so you can kind of learn about yourself. You can, you're learning about yourself. You're testing your limits. You're trying to explore, more of you. Most people wouldn't veer that far, and maybe it's okay. Right. But what would you suggest for people?
It's very simple, actually. So I can give you a very good example. When I was in the Army in basic training, we had to do exercises at height, right? So we had to do like a walk across a high rope that was 20 feet in the air, and you have a safety rope on, safety cable, on, and I don't particularly like heights. And I remember when I was standing at the edge of the platform and it was my turn to go, I was just like, yeah, what's the worst that could happen? Like, am I really going to die? Probably not. And I just kind of took that.
Maybe not. Maybe.
I was like, probably not. But there's an element of faith going into these things that everything's going to be okay, right? So if you were to go on stage as a stand-up comedian, even if you bomb, it's like, okay, but it's still a cool experience. Or with the eating bugs, I wouldn't be too keen on eating bugs, but people have done it, and they're probably okay.
Probably is the key word, Mark.
I think there's an element of faith that you have to have in any of these activities. That yes, okay, in the sauna thing, people have died, but I also trusted myself to get out of there before I was going to die, right? That I probably had enough of a sense of self-preservation that I would open the door and leave before it got to that point. I don't know.
So here's the thing. John, what have you learned about yourself? So all the things you did, what are the things that you learned?
I'm pretty stubborn. That's something that I've learned. And I've also learned that when I haven't pursued interest or passions or curiosities, I've lived to regret it. And there are still a couple of things looking back on that I wish I had done. And at the time I wanted to, but I just didn't. And some of them are trivial. Some of them are really silly. It's like, well, why didn't you just do it? And others are bigger. A really simple example, when I was in law school, there was a class, an elective I could have taken on entertainment law. And I'm really interested in the entertainment industry generally. However, all of my classmates said, if you take that class in entertainment law, you're never going to get a job at a good law firm. They said you should take the finance class, like that. There was a financial aspects of law class, and that sounds horrible to me. Yeah. Like it was not something I was interested in at all. And I thought about it, and I ended up registering for the finance class, and I did not take the entertainment law class. And I sat through this semester of the finance law class, and I barely passed it in the end, and I was just miserable. And at the end of the semester, it's like, why did you do that? Like, that was such a bad idea. Like, you were legitimately passionate about this entertainment law class. It involved all these different aspects of the world outside of law school that you want to be a part of. Yet you didn't take it because you were concerned that maybe you wouldn't get the right kind of job at the right type of law firm. And like, it was just like, looking back on it, I wouldn't make that same mistake today, but at the time it was a mistake I made. It was a choice I made.
There are so many things running through my head right now. I want to piggyback off of your question, Cathey. John, you shared what you learned. I'm pretty stubborn. I've regretted things that I didn't do. I'd like to go deeper on that because I think it would be very beneficial for your audience. Why has it been very important for you? Or how has it benefited you to learn that you're pretty stubborn, that you've regretted things that you haven't done?
Honestly, the stubbornness gives me a sense of self-confidence, that I know that if I get an idea in my head, that I'll pursue it to the best of my ability, and whatever the outcome is, so be it. I can only work as hard as I can, towards a goal, and whether or not I pursue it, okay. But it lets me know that, okay, if you really put your head down and pursue something, chances are you'll probably do pretty well at it, and at least you won't have any regrets at the end. So I think that that's just been a major sort of benefit to living like this throughout my life. And another example, when I got out of the army, I went and worked for the John Kerry campaign in 2004. And of course, Kerry lost the election and I was left without a job. And I had a couple of friends in my life who were like, okay, that didn't work out. Now you need to settle down and get a job and start thinking about a family and get married and, like a white picket fence and golden retriever and all that. And I was like, no, that's absolutely not what I want to do. No, you have to. You're at this point, you're 27 years old. I was almost 28. You have an MBA and, this campaign didn't work out and you're never going to be in politics and whatever. I said, no, it's not what I want to do. I want to move to Europe. And they said, you can't do that. It's just this constant battle. I was like, all right, I'm just not going to talk with you about this anymore. So that was when I won my first big wife carrying race in the US. And I put together a fundraiser so that Team USA could travel to the World Championships in Finland and compete there. And throughout that time, I was working at a moving company. I was an MBA moving furniture all day. And my friend, some of my friends kind of looked down on me like, this is stupid. You're wasting your life. But through that experience of putting together the fundraiser, going to Finland, I ended up getting a job in Finland. And the whole time I wanted to go to Europe and work in Europe, and the wife carrying led me to that. When I was at the World Championships in summer of 2005, I made some contacts and ended up meeting some folks at a startup company in Finland, and they hired me, and I just moved to Finland. And my friends were like, how does this work for you? Because it shouldn't be like that, where it just kind of naturally falls into place. But I think the answer is I was just being true to myself and being true to what I wanted to do. And, again, element of faith, it just worked out. I wasn't trying to force anything. I was just trying to be true to what I wanted to do, and it came together.
Yeah. Mark, I don't know if you noticed this that came up, but, when he said, what I found out, what I learned about myself was that I'm stubborn, and that, there were things that even little things that bugged me that I regretted. And then I was like, that is like the number one thing that people towards the end of their life have, right? Many people fall into that. It's kind of the last phase of a lot of people's life is all the things that they regret. And so this whole idea comes so clear to me now. It's like finding your, what John does so well, which we could all take notes and take lessons and learn from, is that when you're doing these things, well, first of all, you don't know what one thing will connect to the other. Like you go there and you get a job, like, which is the thing that everybody's telling you, like, don't leave, you're dumb, because if you leave because, you're going to walk away from a job and you're doing this other thing that's taking you away from the thing that you should be going after. And then boom, you get this job and you're living in another country. Amazing. And then everybody instantly is jealous. But it's the regret piece that I'm at, because I feel like that I even felt really hard, that little regret that you had, John. Like I felt that, the one about not taking the entertainment law.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an irkful thing, right? I don't know if that's a word, irkful, but you know what I mean.
Irksome, yeah.
It kind of irks you on those things. And I wonder if a lot of us are not just living our life in the moment, and what will irk us later, what will really bug us, even if it's small. I mean, Mark, I definitely think now at this point you have to eat some scorpions. Like you're not gonna be okay if you don't, like.
Actually, I got one that's a little different, right?
Oh, you can't change it now, Mark.
I know I'm not going to change it, but what I will say is, what it also resonated for me is every year around New Year's Eve, at least here in New York City at Coney Island, they do a polar bear plunge.
Oh yeah. Oh.
I hate cold water. Like that, just the idea of running into freezing cold water, like that does not sit with me. And yet I watch the news coverage after every year, and there's people who've never done it. and the way they speak about the sense of accomplishment speaks volumes. I think, John, what resonates with me even more is what you're talking about even goes beyond accomplishment.
Yeah.
You said, I'm answering questions about myself. That tells me that there's something that everybody stands to learn about themselves that they did not know before.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me curious. Like, if
Yeah.
I work up the nerve to do the polar bear plunge, what could I possibly learn about myself that I don't currently know?
Mm.
That's wow.
You need to do this. You need to do
Yes,
this.
I agree. I agree. That's a good one. Then you don't have to eat a scorpion. We'll let you off the hook on that one.
Thank
You
you.
off the hook. I love that. John, I'm curious. I love that, Mark, a lot, because a lot of the things that I'm hearing are, I don't know. I guess I'll ask you, John, instead of assuming. Are these things that you thought of, or are they just a byproduct, or have all of this just been a great byproduct from everything that you've done? Like, did you go into them going, hey, you know what, I'm probably going to learn a lot, this will be, or did you just go into it and do it anyways, and then all of this has been a great byproduct of you just be willing to step into these spaces?
I would say the learning is a byproduct, and again, with the Toastmasters is such a great example. So I put so much effort into learning about speech writing, and really by the end of it, regardless of the outcome, like as we got closer to that event in Nassau, I realized, wow, like I'm actually learning quite a bit about speech writing, but I didn't go into it with that mindset. It was more the mindset of how far can I push this? But I just realized I was becoming a better communicator, and I was learning a lot about effective writing and effective communicating. And I had this kind of peaceful moment before Nassau. I was like, well, no matter what happens there, this has just been a great experience, and I've learned a lot, and I've invested in myself. Of course, the competitive side me is still, hey, like, we got to win this thing. but it just made me view the world a little bit differently. And now when I'm watching television, I'm watching maybe a news anchor or something, or I'm watching a YouTube video, or I'm watching the way people are interacting with each other on the street or at a cafe or whatever it might be. I'm kind of reflecting back on my own process through Toastmasters and learning about communication, and just sort of evaluating and just thinking that it's very interesting.
John, what's the next thing that's got you asking, how far can I push this?
Lately, I've had this itch about pursuing a PhD. Just kind of like, what would that experience look like? And that's the way I normally go into it. It's like, oh, what would this look like? And how would I feel about it? What would it mean? I'm not interested in doing a PhD just for the letters. It's a journey, it's a process, and I think it would be very challenging. And the question is, could I do it? I'm in my late 40s right now. I have obligations. I have a family. I have things I need to do. Is this a good use of my time? Because I only have so many hours that I could put into this. I need to be working. Just kind of curious what all of that would look like. And again, it's stemming from curiosity.
Cathey, what do you think about that question? How far can I push this?
Oh,
I'm getting on t-shirts.
I wrote it down. I wrote it down in the corner over here. I was like, how far can I push this? That became like, that was a good, I thought that was a good mantra for him. I was thinking that that's probably a lot of what John does, is like, oh, how far can I go with this? How far can I go with this wife carrying? How far can I go with this Toastmaster thing? How can I, no matter what it is. And I love, John, too, that some of your interests aren't, because I think, our audience might listen right now and be like, oh, John's doing all this physical, like becoming a professional wrestler, and like it sounds like the physical stuff. But I love that your curiosity and your, willingness or your even desire to push yourself goes to the level of PhD, goes to the level of even entertainment law. Like, what are the fringes out there? Like that's where my mind went. I would ask you this though, John, if you, like, let's say there's somebody in your family that you love very much. I'm just going to give you a scenario, and you know that they're struggling with life because life has just been boring. They've subscribed to everything that they were supposed to do. They've done the job that they were supposed to do, maybe because their parents did this job and they just followed suit or whatever. How would you try to talk them or convince them, or what would you tell them to try to go find their, go push their own limits, or, go find their unconventional? How would you do that?
I think it would start off with just a very simple question, like, what are you curious about? And just let it flow naturally from there. Because I think once that curiosity hook is kind of like in there, then you start asking more questions, and then there's this snowball effect that, once you start asking questions, the questions start to build on themselves, and you can start to create these, like a world in your mind around, these unanswered questions and how they're all interconnected to each other. And then maybe somebody might just need a little push out the door to start answering those questions. And it's like, it could even be a question in and of itself, coming back to this idea of, what would it look like? Oh, what would it look like if you started to answer some of these questions, right? And then they can start to visualize how they would be in that situation. And once you can start to picture yourself even tiptoeing, into that situation, then it's like, okay, you're there. You might be on the edge of it, just barely inside, but the first step is always the hardest, right? So once you cross that threshold, then it's like, you can start to build a little bit of momentum. And you might start off with the small, safe questions that you answer, like, oh, how much would it cost to join this club? Right, something like that. And then you go to the website and you're like, oh, it's $25. Like, can I afford that? And it's like, yeah, $25. That's reasonable. And then it's like, oh, well, what? How much time does it take? Oh, it's like 1 hour per week. Okay, well, that's not a lot of time. I think I could find a way to do it. And it just sort of builds on itself. And next thing you know, you're quitting your job, moving to LA. You're a wrestler. It's very, very natural transition, right?
That was it. I saw where you were going with that, John. It was leading right to moving to LA and quitting your job, I love that. I wonder too, though, when you said the question, I like it that you ask people what they're curious about. And, but one thing that I think we might be overlooking, maybe, possibly, is you said something that really resonated with me. I think imagination is strong. And, they've even done some studies where people were in really hard situations and some people survived and some people didn't. And many times one of the things that was it rooted in each one of the people that did survive was that there was something that they wanted to go do, right? There was something that they had, like, and just being able to imagine something, I feel like gets you really far. And so I liked when you went down this road of like, oh, what would it cost to join this club? What would it look like? And then all of a sudden you're in Nassau, speaking at the, international convention of the Toastmasters International Speaking Competition for the world champion, right? You're in this crazy space just because you've imagined. And maybe the power also is in imagining the things that you are curious about, right? Like taking it to the furthest and just starting with imagination. I don't know. To me, I thought that was really powerful, because even when I heard you say, Mark, about the eating the animals, I didn't imagine it for me, but I imagined it for you. Like but when I imagined it, it was a really powerful thing. I was like, oh, that would be great for Mark. I mean, I don't know.
She's like, here.
I'm totally kidding. No, but but that's how far that actually is in all seriousness. When you talked about the cold plunge, I was like, oh, I can imagine that being a really great thing. I don't know what you think about that, John, but I think that was a critical thing that you threw in there.
I think I'll butcher a quote from Einstein, but everything stems from imagination, right? You have to imagine it first in order for it to become a thing,
Yeah.
right? And that's very much what it is. That there has to be an idea first that kind of stimulates a process.
Mhm.
And with the cold plunge, Mark, I'm going to hold you to this. It's
Me too, Mark.
it's like, oh, like, what would that be like? I have to wake up at 6 a.m. and go down to the beach and, jump into the water. It's like, okay, I could do that. There's no real reason why I couldn't. And, what would it feel like? Oh, I bet it's going to be like this and this. And then, you end up testing it. And then you have a good story to tell the next day, or later that day, as you're sipping hot chocolate, or whatever the case might be.
And you might end up on a stage somewhere, talking about your cold plunge experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I like that. I would love, John, for you to I would love for you to be in a space where you were talking to people and encouraging people to do it. Because I do think that most of the world sits around and sits in their pretty safe space.
I think part of it is to accept the concept of incrementalism as a way to reach your goal. Because if you start off with a very lofty goal and you have this vision, it's like, man, like, how could I get there? Right? Like, it just seems so
Yeah.
far away and so difficult and so like abstract. But everything can be broken down to little teeny pieces. Again, a cliche, how do you run a marathon? It's just one step at a time.
Yeah.
That's really all it is, right? You don't need to have a plan to get to the goal. You just need to have little plans that put you on the path to it. Some people are in better situations than others. They have better financial resources, better connections, whatever the case might be. But fundamentally, everybody's doing the same thing. They should just be moving towards their goals.
Yeah.
I wrote down, accept the concept of incrementalism.
I know, incrementalism.
I love that. I love that. And yet and Cathey, I think I want to thank you for uplifting the fact that John has talked about a range from sauna competition to PhD.
Yeah.
And I love the relatability of that, right? Because it doesn't have to be an alternative sport, right? But it could be something that, for me in my world, going for a PhD, that's my alternative sport.
Right? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And it would be hard. It would be just as hard, right? For the same reasons that John said. Time, like, and then like some of the things like for a PhD, right? You're weighing out the time versus the reward, like what, a lot of things. I love that.
Even when I went to law school, I had, how old was I? I was like maybe 33 years old or something. I had to make some career decisions in order to go to law school. And I had peers who were like, it's a terrible idea. Well, you're in your 30s, you're on a good career path. Why would you leave that career path to go to law school? And it's just like, this is what I want to do. Like I didn't have any other explanation. It was just, it's really what I want to do. I'm interested in this. And I went to law school. And they're like, how do you know if you're going to be a good lawyer? I don't. But I know that I want to try. And whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. I love this. Well, I love some of the themes that came up, right? We've got regret, we got imagination, we've got incrementalism, these things that are all part of who you are, John, as a person, that make you do these really interesting things. And you're learning so many great things about yourself. And I would hope that people would hear that and be inspired by the range of all of these things, like, the range even between what you've done between the sport and the, law school and PhD, or even considering the PhD. I could see you talking about that as a consideration. I had a similar thing happen to me when my kids were young. I had kids pretty young, and I was like, oh, I want to go back to school and, I want to get, at that time, I wanted to get a bachelor's degree. And I was like, oh, I could easily do it, but do you know how much time it would take away from my kids right now? And then ultimately I decided that that's just not the route I wanted to go. It didn't make sense. It would be easy to do as far as the actual thing, but it didn't make any sense. So I love that you even weigh options that you don't do, but you let your imagination and you let your curiosities and you let your, desires and your kind of, I guess, need for learning about yourself and doing different things to guide you.
Can we
Cool.
can we swap out the word option and swap in the word alternative?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's something I'm walking away with today is
Mhm.
like what's my alternative, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be my alternative sport, right? But it's what's my alternative, and how far can I push this alternative? And I think we do struggle as a humanity, as a society, to even pursue the alternative, right? It's either make it or bust, right? But it's not like how far can I take this? Win, lose, or draw. And if I take it as far as I can, what are all the different things that I can learn about myself that will take me a step further and maybe take me to places I didn't even imagine. So I'm walking away with, and yes, maybe walking, I'm not even gonna say maybe, walking in ice cold water on January 1st in Coney Island, that's an insane alternative that, yeah, I'm gonna sit here and say I'm sure there's something I can learn and something I can gain from that I would never expect. Thank you for challenging me to an alternative.
Yeah.
Mark, are you going to do it?
I'm going to find out how to do it. I don't know if I don't know what the
Incrementalism.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yes, that's my first step after this. I'm going to find out what's the first step towards doing that.
I love that. I love that. It's awesome.
And you can test yourself a little bit too, beforehand with cold showers or something like that, so that you're prepared for it. And then I think that builds a lot of excitement on the day of the event, and it's a lot like being an athlete. So I've been in plenty of situations where I was very well prepared for a race, right? Like carrying or rowing, or it could be anything. But I remember this one wife carrying race in particular. I was at the starting line and I wasn't nervous at all. I was just curious. Because in my mind, I knew that I had done everything that I could to prepare for that moment. And it's like, I just hope I do well. I hope that I can express myself well in this moment, that I don't trip or, there's some unfortunate accident or something. But I was like, I was at total peace with where I was. I wasn't nervous at all because I knew that I had done everything I could to prepare for it. And I ended up getting second place in that race. And I wasn't happy about getting second, but the guy who beat me deserved to win. And that was it. And I think, again, I answered the question like, okay, how well am I going to do in this race? But you can apply that same way of thinking to the polar bear plunge, right? So, you can start by splashing yourself with a little bit of cool water and kind of, building up to it so that when you're there on the beach, ready to run into that freezing cold water, like there's almost a sense of calm. You're like, okay, like this is what I've been preparing for. Let's see what it's like. Let's see how it goes. Boom.
Yeah.
Let's see how far I can push this.
Yeah. See how far you can stay in the water, however you will choose to test yourself.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. All right. Well, Mark, thank you for saying what you took away from it. Like I said, I've taken away a lot of different, my brain is kind of stuck on a couple of these concepts that I love, thinking about things that I might regret, thinking about things I'm curious about, thinking about how I can imagine myself in situations so I can kind of mentally prepare before I am standing at a starting line at some point going, I'm not nervous. I prepared. I imagined it. I did all the work. I'm here. I love that. But John, we're curious about you. In the last kind of hour or so that we've been chatting, what are some of the things that kind of are percolating in your brain about what we said?
Oh, you guys have me thinking that I'm not doing enough stuff.
Wow. That is not what I expected.
with this conversation, I'm reflecting on all the things that I haven't done that I feel like I need to do.
Yeah, that's not what I expected you to say, John. But I can appreciate that actually. I can appreciate that now you've done a lot of things and you're like, oh, what are things I haven't done?
And I think a big part of it is trying to prioritize those things, right? Like which ones am I most curious about, or which one do I think would lead to the best personal outcome, whether it's personal development or just maybe improve the quality of my relationship with my wife, or just something like that. Because there's really no shortage of things to do. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have is finding the ones that will bring us the most satisfaction. And that's a very individual concept, right? It comes, everybody's different. Everybody has their own interests or, their own ideas about what might make them happy. And I think it takes a little bit of reflection to sit back and say, okay, this activity might be interesting, but it's not as interesting as this, and trying to prioritize some of those different things.
Right. Like Mark did with the polar bear overeating scorpion. Like
you can combine those two activities, right? You could be on the beach popping, like maggots or something before you jump into the water.
Before you jump in, and then you have to debate, like, oh, is this really helping me here? I love that. Well, John, how would somebody find you if they were looking for you to see all the cool things that you've done, or to continue to follow you in your journey?
Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn are probably the three best. On Facebook, my name is Wife Carrying, so that's pretty easy to find.
Wife Carrying.
And on Instagram, it's Viking Johan with 2 N's.
Okay.
And LinkedIn is John J. Lund. So I think those are the 3 best ways to get in touch with me.
Which social media handle is the sauna burner, or the No, that sounds great. John, thank you for being on the show. We really appreciate, that you took our thoughts in a different space. You made us really think about things that could be possible. And I don't know, just thank you for challenging us all on how to look at life a little bit differently and how to live a little bit more how you want to live. Thank you.
This is so great. Thank you so much for having me on. Hopefully your audience will get some benefit from this, and maybe just think about some of their interests, curiosities, passions, and how to pursue them with just little baby steps.
Oh, I love that. The incrementalism. That's a good one to leave on. Thank you, John. Anybody watching right now, if you've watched and said, wow, that was an interesting idea, because it is. But that you have an idea that you want to chat with Mark and I about, just reach us. We have a website. It's about to go down show.com. And Mark and Cathey, Mark with the C, Cathey with an E, you'll find us. John, thank you again for being on our show. We know it totally went down today, and it'll go down next time, but I don't know if it'll ever go down like it did today. So thank you for being here and show us how it's done. And until next time, stay curious.
Awesome. So thank you so much. Thank you.